Hey, it's Ross from rosslukeman.com. Today I want to talk to you about how to take a 50 amp RV or travel trailer off grid. And this video came about when I was contacted the other day. A guy had purchased a 2024 travel trailer from Forest River RV. It was a Grand Surveyor, beautiful interior, and it came with the inverter prep package is what they said, and that allowed you to go off grid. And so what they did is they had a little loop up here at the front of the travel trailer, a wire loop, and they said splice into that wire and add your inverter charger and you can go off grid. And that was all the instructions. They did not provide a wiring diagram or any kind of blueprints for this. And the Forest River forums, there were no diagrams and everybody was trying to figure this out. And so I spent an afternoon figuring this out, and I wanted to share it with you here and show you how you would take a 50 amp RV off grid and what you may be up against if you have the inverter prep package from Forest River or some of the other manufacturers. And the guy essentially said, I'm not sure I would have spent $50,000 on this travel trailer if I had known what you showed today. And he was a little bit upset. You know, I was the bearer of bad news. So I think this could be a potentially very valuable video for you if you have a travel trailer like this, or you have another 50 amp RV and you want to take it off grid and you want to see how that would be done. So let's talk about what he had in this particular travel trailer. So as I said, he had the loop up there in the pass-through. There was just a wire loop. Now that's a 3-conductor, 14-gauge wire. I believe it was yellow. And his instructions from the dealer were to cut into that wire. So it came from the RV back here, and there was just a random loop. It didn't go anything. It just came out into the pass-through and then went back. So he spliced into it like they said, and he ran it down to an inverter charger. It was a 3,000 watt Renogy inverter charger. And it was a 120 volt model. And then he had an Epoch 460 amp hour lithium battery. And he connected those and turned it all on, unplugged the shore power, turned on the inverter, and he found out that 2 outlets worked in the kitchen. And what we found out later, they had a breaker box like this in the kitchen at the end of the counter. This is a Wafco WFCO. And it was beautiful. They had their 50 amp inlet on the side of the trailer. And we found out there was the 4-conductor wire that ran from the inlet straight to the breaker box. So we'll go ahead and draw that in. So that's that breaker box, and basically they had those 4 wires running straight inside the cabinet to the breaker box. So you have 2 hot wires on 50 amp service, so you have a red and a black. Those are your hots. So black, red, green for ground. And then as far as the neutral white, let's see. We'll do that. Let's go ahead and do that as brown. So that ran through, and what we figured out by flipping the breakers in the breaker box was on the end of one side of the breaker box, there was a breaker called GFCI. And basically, that connected to that loop, and then it ran to these outlets. So we'll draw it like that. But it was the GFCI breaker. They just made the wire extra long to run through that pass-through and power those outlets. So he had spent $3,000 thinking he was going to turn on his air conditioner or his microwave, and he could plug in a coffee maker to one of those outlets, but that was it. And of course he had his 12 volt item. So he had a 12 volt lead acid battery out here on the tongue of the trailer. And he had the solar package. I believe it was a 200 watt solar panel on the roof that had a charge controller and stepped it down to charge this 12 volt battery. So even if he came back after a month, he would still be able to run his 12 volt devices and operate the trailer to some degree. But with his 120 volt items, namely the air conditioners that he wanted to run, you know, he wanted to go out in the pristine places. He was a photographer and he wanted to go out and capture nature and stuff like that. He wanted to get away from the campgrounds. This is what he had, and because he had a 4-season, really nice travel trailer from Forest River, he could not access the underbelly. It was all sealed off and insulated, and so we couldn't get to a lot of the wires. Other than this main trunk line was inside the bottom of the cabinet. If we pulled out the furnace cover, you could see it back in there, and it was just a straight shot from the shore power inlet. So this is what he had. Let me show you what I would do if I were designing this trailer from scratch, or if I had to retrofit and overhaul what was there. So you need to break this main line. If you want to power all these breakers off of batteries, you need to splice into this main 4-conductor line with a split phase inverter charger. So this inverter charger that he had was 120 volts, and that worked for this one little line going through there. So it had a hot, neutral, and a ground. So it had a 3-conductor 14 gauge wire. Now the other part that's a little bit problematic with this, 14 gauge wire on a 15 amp breaker. However, they don't know what size inverter. He had a 3000 watt inverter, which if you run 3000 watts through that wire, it's built for 1800 watts, 15 amps. Is about the max that you want to run through a 14 gauge wire. So if you run 30 amps through there, you get, let's say you get a 5000 watt inverter, you're running 30 amps through a cord that's made to carry 15, because the breaker is back here, there's no breaker up here. So that breaker is preventing 15 amps. 15 amps is the max that will run through the line up to here. But once you get to here, let's say you cut off shore power, you unplug the trailer, now you're running the inverter off the battery. If you have a 5000 watt inverter, it can send up to 5000 watts through that line, and you could have a potential fire hazard. If there's no breaker from here, between here and your outlets, you can do whatever you want. Who knows what you're going to plug into these outlets? You could burn stuff up. So what you really need to do is go upstream from the breaker box. You need to break this line, and let's go ahead and talk about how you would do that. We're going to erase this equipment. And I would just say with that particular circuit, you know, just leave it. So fine, the GFCI wire is a little bit extra long. It runs up to the front of the trailer, powers your GFCI outlets. That's fine, but that's not going to give us what we're looking for. And so what we're going to do is we're going to break this main line right here. We're going to put our inverter charger somewhere in the vicinity of that main line. And for this guy, he had a washer dryer area in the closet that was for future use of a washer and dryer. So he could potentially put it in the closet here next to the bedroom and probably pull this wire out and basically the black would go in. Let me just draw this quickly. So all of those wires would stop in that machine, and let's say your battery is here, and your battery is feeding red and black, positive and negative, to that machine. And one thing I want to point out, this would be a split phase 120-240 machine. Split phase would be the term that you would look for. So this particular gentleman had unfortunately purchased a 120 volt inverter charger, which would go for a 30 amp service. There's just a hot, neutral, and ground. It's a 3-wire connection. 50 amp has a 4-wire connection. You got 2 hots, the red and the black. In 120 volt systems, the red does not exist, but you've got that red wire in here, and basically you need the inverter charger that can take a red and a black hot and pass it through, and that's exactly what it does when you're on shore power. It has a transfer switch in there, and it says, okay, we've got the power grid coming in, go ahead and pass that through, and all your breakers work, and nobody really knows that this machine even exists because it looks like the power is just coming straight from the plug straight to your breaker box. All your appliances work. The only difference there is that this has a battery charger, maybe 120 amps battery charger at 12 volts, about 1440 watts would be going into your battery to recharge while you're on the power grid. Now, as soon as you unplug the trailer from the power grid, this transfer switch is going to detect that the power grid has gone away. It's going to turn on its inverter, and it's going to send that power through both the red and the black to power up both sides of the breaker box. So if we look at the breaker box, it actually has 2 different sides. So the metal bar at the top is broken. So you have this side on the left and this side on the right. And you're going to have a double 50 amp breaker there. So this 50 amp breaker is going to light up this side. This 50 amp breaker is going to light up that side. If you multiply 50 amps times 120 volts, that's 6,000 watts. So you got 6,000 watts over here and 6,000 watts over here, potential power. And that's why they'll put one air conditioner on this side and the other air conditioner on that side. So you're balancing the load. The red wire would power up one side, the black wire would power up the other side, and then your green and your white would go into the bus bars on the bottom. Now, I want to point out one thing. There is a plug on the back of this box, and that connects to the only wires that are in the box when you purchase it. There's a black, a white, and a green, and the black is not connected to anything, and basically that is to power up your converter, essentially a battery charger. It's going to plug into the back of the breaker box. That black wire is going to plug into some breaker that you add, and they'll label that breaker converter or whatever, and it's going to take the 120 volts from the back of this and it's going to step it down to 12 volts, and it's going to charge your lead acid 12 volt battery. However, we're starting to have a little bit of duplication with our systems because this battery nowadays would typically be a large lithium battery like this gentleman had. He had a 460 amp hour epoch battery. That's lithium. This is lead acid. The converter is going to plug in to the top of the right side of the breaker box. You can see we have all these fuses. This is your 12 volt side to run your slide outs and things like that. And that converter is going to plug into the top of here, and then it's going to continue on to charge this battery. And so if you add a lithium battery like this with a split phase inverter charger, that now becomes your battery charger. It's up to 120 amps. If you have something like the Victron, this is the Victron MultiPlus 2. This is the 2x120 model. So that works for split phase 50 amp systems. It's got a 120 amp battery charger. Your converter that's connected to the breaker box might be 40 amps or 50 amps. It's a lot smaller battery charger, and it's typically set up for lead acid. So with a lithium battery, it needs to have a different charging profile. So what I would do is go ahead and connect this lithium battery over to your 12 volt fuse block in your breaker box. And I would go ahead and disconnect your converter. Now, if you can get your converter to run on lithium, you could run them in parallel. So you'd have a 120 amp charger plus a 50 amp charger, but you would need to match their charging profiles. And the last thing you need to do is typically pull this battery out of the circuit and make this your primary battery. Or if you have two of these, make those your primary battery. And the last change that you would need to make, these RV trailers have solar, and the solar is going to be set up for lead acid. And so if you can, you would change the solar charge controller to the lithium setting and let it charge these larger batteries. So that is a little bit of the background story of the inverter prep package from Forest River and what you may be dealing with in some of these travel trailers that I would say I kind of see their point in that customers are going to put one battery like this and they're going to try to run the whole trailer and it's going to shut down. This inverter charger is going to shut down and they're going to call Forest River and say, hey, you know, it's not working right because this inverter is only 3,000 watts. The power you get from a 50 amp plug is up to 12,000 watts. So you're running at 25% of your available power with a 3,000 watt inverter. Now you could get two of them and run them in parallel and have 6,000 watts. The unit I showed, that's actually 2,400 watts continuous inverter. So now you have those variables to deal with. You need to know how much battery power you're burning through, and I can imagine a lot of phone calls at Forest River, but I think that the little loop in the pass-through area, it's a little bit misleading. What I would just say is all that's going to power is 2 outlets in the kitchen. And I think the sales guys need to say that, or just give them the blueprint. Here's our electrical, but apparently that's proprietary, they can't share it. Well, you have people spending $50,000 and then they're buying all this equipment and they find out only 2 outlets work. So I think you're just going to frustrate the customers like that. But this is how you would do it. It was a little bit difficult. As I said, there was a closet right there on the other side of the bathroom and you could snake those wires through. But basically you need to break that main trunk line from the 50 amp shore power and run it through a split phase inverter charger so that the entire breaker box powers up. And by the way, this doesn't put out 2 legs of 120. It just puts out 1 leg of 120 volts, but it will power up the red and the black side so your entire breaker box will work. And that applies to the Victron. Renogy also has a split phase inverter charger and it will power up both sides like that. But that way you have 120 volts on all your breakers and you can run everything so long as your batteries last and your inverter has enough power. So you probably don't want to turn on everything, but you can run the microwave or an air conditioner with this setup. So I hope that was helpful. I'll go ahead and leave it at that. If you want more help with your electrical system for your travel trailer or your RV, I have a document that you may be interested in called the Ultimate Van Power Cheat Sheet. It's got a discussion of the 3 major charging sources in vans and RVs, which are solar, shore, and alternator power. It's going to talk about how they all have times when they excel, but they also have times when they each fall short. But when you combine them in a holistic power strategy, it's going to make sure that you have a good charge source no matter where you go out on the road so you can enjoy what you went out there to do and you're not going to be worried about running out of power. There's also a discussion about different battery types and the strengths and weaknesses of those. That's going to help you narrow in on which battery type is going to be right for your project. And then lastly, there is a really cool diagram that's essentially your entire power system on one page. It's going to show the 3 major charging sources at the top and how that power makes its way through the system to charge your battery bank and how it comes out at your end devices such as your microwave or your air conditioner. For instance, how does the shore power make its way through the system, charge up your batteries, and then come out and run your microwave? So it's a really cool diagram that is included with the Ultimate Van Power cheat sheet. To grab your own copy, all you have to do is click the link below or go to rosslukeman.com/vanpower. So thanks for watching. I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you in the next video.